Most co-op puzzle games rely pretty heavily on communication. In games like Portal 2, you and your friend are in the same location, so it really only depends on how well you can communicate your ideas to the friend. In games like We Were Here, you're in two completely different locations and you have to describe your surroundings to progress. But what if you were in the same location and still had to describe your surroundings to one another? Bokura is a 2022 8-bit puzzle platformer where you and your friend play the game from what seems to be two different versions of the same universe, forcing you to communicate in ways you wouldn't traditionally think. You can't just assume that your friend is seeing the same things that you are. You need to give them every tiny detail to fully understand the sheer amount of differences that are present. I went into this game expecting some interesting puzzles and a simple, sweet story, but that is not what I got. Bokura took serious, severely dark and depressing topics and somehow used this unique gameplay to enhance everything. My friend Cyan and I played through this game 2 separate times, one from each perspective, and we still didn't truly grasp how many differences there were until the after-credits sequence of our second playthrough. I could sit here describing it all day, but I think it's best to just show you instead. The first puzzle this game throws your way is trying to understand how the main menu works. Nothing is labeled, and you have to work entirely on experiences from past games. Not only does this make the game inaccessible for the general public, despite the fact that it's quite simple and could absolutely tap into that market, but it also makes the game incredibly frustrating to start for people who play games every day. Cyan and I spent over 20 minutes trying to figure out how to set things up. We quickly realized that this house icon was for the host to use since it brings up a code for your friend to input. The other icon in the center brings up an empty box to put the code into, but even after putting it in exactly the same, it didn't work. We both had our regions set to auto because that's the default, but we couldn't figure out how to change our regions manually. It turns out that there are separate sections of the menu that you can enter that don't allow you to hit certain buttons, one of which being the region button. But wait, when you open up the region menu, the only option for US is US. Earlier I was put into USW while Cyan was put into normal US. Why the heck would it automatically put me into a region that doesn't exist in the menu? When you finally manage to get into the same lobby, you and your friend have to choose between the two characters. They don't have names, so I'll be calling them Blue and Green because of their coat colors. Cyan went with Green and I chose Blue, partially because the little guy kinda looks like me. The game begins with a man on a train coming home from work. The design is fairly ambiguous, kind of a mishmash of both of the boys from the start, but from what we can tell, it appears to be Green since he has the same red scarf. He's reflecting on his past, thinking about all the things that he used to do, the things he wishes he could still do now, which are all impossible due to the boring adult that he's turned into. He thinks about what he used to entertain himself with and how it was replaced by content that's just interesting enough to make him forget about the dull life that he's living. He browses the web, finding an article announcing the release of the next Pokemon game. Clearly this world's non-copyright Pokemon. He used to play it all the time as a kid alongside his best friend in the world. Then one winter, everything changed. Whenever he thinks about it, he feels entirely helpless. Helpless to push the memories from his mind. We flash back to the events of that day, bringing us to some far more familiar figures. 10-year-old versions of Green and Blue are battling each other in Pokemon, with Blue losing like he always does. Green doesn't want to get the new Pokemon because he knows Blue won't be able to buy it, and it won't be any fun without him. It sounds like Blue has somewhat of a sad life. His mother is constantly preoccupied with her own life, running a bar and spending time with her boyfriend. Blue won't be getting Christmas presents this year, let alone the new Pokemon game. Green pipes up, claiming that he can buy the consoles and games for both of them. His parents have the money, and it's not like they ever pay any attention to him. They would never notice if he bought the same game twice. Blue rejects the offer, claiming he first needs to win against Green at least one time on the current version. He turns, gazing up at a statue of the town's mayor perched on a hilltop. Both of the boys dislike it. They think the mayor is a vanity-obsessed idiot and never want to grow up to be anything like him. The boys talk about how the statue feels like it's looking down on them, and how they wish they could break it. Green suggests that they use some of his fireworks to do just that. His parents bought some and promised to set them off with him, but it never happened. The statue's legs look thin, so why not use the fireworks to break them? The duo make an agreement. Blue wants to run away, and Green wants to destroy the statue. Why not do both? Blue doesn't know where they'll run off to, but that doesn't matter. They agree to meet at the foot of the mountain tomorrow morning. The next morning, they carry out their promise, and we finally gain control over the characters. The art style is adorable, and I love the color palettes they chose. The game recommends you play with a controller, and it controls great that way. I imagine it would work just fine with a keyboard and mouse, since it was most comfortably controlled using the D-pad. All the puzzles are physics-based, and for the most part, they control really well. There were some glitches here and there that I'll mention as we come across them, but overall, everything feels solid. There was no lag, which was super important when doing puzzles that require precise timing. Green and blue start to make their way up the mountain, pushing blocks to fill in gaps and create platforms to reach higher areas. The boys can't swim, so they use bridges and blocks to platform over bodies of water. Bridges like these can only hold the weight of one person at a time, which has multiple uses. First, it makes the players wait and take turns for certain puzzles, and second, it prevents one person from moving on without the other, as both players are needed to stand on the bridges, breaking them and granting access to the rest of the levels. Since the puzzles are mainly physics-based, there are tons of things like pushing blocks onto seesaws to lift one of the sides up so the boys can both get up the edge of the cliff. The entire tutorial section is great, allowing for relatively safe experimentation so you can learn the mechanics of the game without losing much progress. Many mechanics are disregarded as you progress, like holding up bridges so that heavy objects like blocks can be moved over them. That one disappears after like 2 uses, but the core mechanics stay mostly the same. I really like this puzzle where you use 2 boxes and a pool of water to form a staircase so you can reach a cliff edge. This game really likes when you think vertically, and this puzzle is a great example of that. Just remember there is fall damage. With the tutorial complete, the boys stumble upon something unusual. There's a rancid odor coming from nearby, an odor coming from the rotting corpse of a deer. They take a closer look, and the world around them slowly fills with bits of static. They look at the rotting flesh, the maggots, the flies swarming the body. Blue and green become lightheaded, stepping back and collapsing onto the floor. The static intensifies. A creature enters the scene looking like a mutated jumble of body parts. 4 eyes, jagged teeth, a tongue that looks like a tentacle, and tears pouring down its face. It leaves the boys alone as their consciousness fades. Green awakens, then blue. Everything is robotic. The corpse, the floors, even the boys themselves. They stare at each other in shock, speechless at the bizarre changes. The world is a desolate wasteland, and they're no longer human. After confirming each other's identities, they try to figure out what's happening. They woke up in some kind of alternate universe. They must be in the same place as before, right? The path certainly looks the same, at least mostly. With no other options, they agree to move forwards, but before they get past the deer, Green makes Blue promise not to eat him. This makes absolutely no sense, right? Why would a robot eat another robot?
So what do you see on your screens right now?
We're in a robot world, right? Pink grass, weird faces.
Not for me.
Seriously?
Seriously.
What are you seeing?
I'm seeing a little forest, a little colorful forest. I am a duck and you are a bear.
I'm a bear? Everything we're seeing is completely different, like we're in 2 alternate reflections of the same location. The terrain is the same for right now, almost as if we're experiencing a retexture, but that luxury won't last for long. Blue's world is robotic and post-apocalyptic, with the majority of the assets being clumped together assortments of metal in different shapes and sizes. Everything is rusty and desaturated, which complements the melancholic piano music of the soundtrack quite well. Green's world is a lot more playful, with a bouncy and happy soundtrack and animal characters. It feels like something you would find on a poster at school, with bright colors, simple shapes, and all kinds of educational tools laying around. Where Blue sees a decaying cross poking up from the ground, Green sees protractors and pencils. Now that the boys have changed, the puzzles have as well. Instead of platforming with mechanics that you would expect to find on a path leading up to a mountain, there are huge buttons and floating platforms scattered about from both perspectives. I can't really go into detail about every single puzzle that there is, so as we go along, I'm just going to mention a few of my favorites and why I like them. Here's a cool one right near the start. To progress, you need to head to the right side of the screen, but there's a huge fan that prevents you from moving. One of the 2 players has to climb this chain and stand on a button to deactivate it. I stood on the button while Cyan moved on, but I wasn't able to jump back down without breaking my little robotic neck. To combat this, Cyan presses this button to activate a secondary fan that'll propel me over to this box of spring. After moving a teddy bear cushion / spring box a little bit closer, Cyan presses this button to activate a secondary fan that will propel me onto said cushion so that we can both safely move forward. I like this one because it was relatively straightforward, but we messed it up right at the end. It gave us a better understanding of the physics engine and how much forethought we would have to put into our actions. Another one I really liked was this hologram puzzle. Here, I stay behind next to a grid of icons while Cyan moves forward and navigates a little obstacle course. It's full of the same icons that I am seeing, each of which are associated with a mechanism. She would describe what buttons needed to be pressed in what order, kinda like with the runes in We Were Here. Our descriptions ranged from relatively normal to, well, so standing, then penis, then new Nintendo 3DS XL.
Yep.
The boys begin to realize that what they are saying to each other doesn't line up, more so than normal. They don't quite realize that they're seeing entirely different worlds yet, but they're on their way to that conclusion. To the left, some distant voices can be heard. It's two people, seemingly a husband and a wife. They're out looking for their son and ask Blue and Green if they've seen anyone. The boys haven't, much to the parents' disappointment. The father suggests that they return home, agitating the mother. She's infuriated at how calm and easy to give up he is, storming off to continue looking. The father apologizes to the boys for fighting in front of them, beginning his trek back home without his spouse. This deeply disturbs Blue, who says that parents shouldn't fight. He runs off after the mom, telling Green to go talk to the dad. Green is off-put by this, as it's his understanding that fighting is what parents always do. This is one of my favorite story-based mechanics in the game. Both players split up and are told to mute while they have entirely different interactions. Then they meet up and discuss what they saw before making any decisions. Blue runs after the mom, telling her that if she doesn't talk with her husband, their son will be sad. He learns that the son didn't go missing, he ran away. He always looked so troubled, but by the time that the mother built up the courage to ask so she could try and help out, the boy had run away. When she was a child, she never had a family of her own. She never loved herself, and by the time she was pregnant with her son, she didn't even know who the father was. This means that the man from earlier isn't the biological father, which according to the mom means that he doesn't care about their son. She claims that he wants to have another child and start a new family instead of continuing to look for their current son, which has caused her to consider leaving him. Blue convinces her to head back and talk instead of running away. Green runs after the dad, similarly telling him to talk to his wife. The man claims it's none of Green's business, but after hearing that the other boy went after his wife, he agrees to return. The man asks Green if he ran away from home, claiming that he used to do the same thing as a child. He liked the freedom even though he would always get into trouble. Maybe that's the same reason his son ran away. This all happened a whopping 3 years ago. He loves his son with all of his heart, but after waiting for so long, he thinks it'll hurt even more to continue searching, to continue hoping that his son is alive and well when he most likely isn't. He talks to Green, claiming that he thinks he and his wife should try to move on after so long. Dwelling on the past like this isn't healthy for anyone. Finally reunited, the parents begin to have a conversation. Both apologize for what they said, agreeing to continue the search together. They apologize to the boys once again for subjecting them to this argument. Before they can leave, Blue pleads for them to get along. He doesn't want them getting a divorce. Saying that out loud leads the dad to begin thinking about divorce as an option. Maybe it's for the best. If they don't want the same things in life, why should they stay together? It would do more harm than good. Blue freaks out, begging them to stay together so their son won't be sad. The mother claims that her son will be happy as long as he's with her. The father asks her what makes her assume that their boy would want to live with the mother, prompting her to say that their son doesn't love him. The dad says that's just what she wants to think, theorizing that their son ran away because she always put too much pressure on him. She claims that she knows him best because he's her son. They ask Blue and Green who they would rather stay with if given the choice, not allowing them to choose both. Cyan and I relayed all of our information to each other. Well, I relayed all my information to Cyan. She neglected to mention the whole son being missing for 3 years thing, which led us down a slightly different logical pathway when making our decisions. Originally, I left in our entire thought process for the choice we made, but then it was kinda boring and it would also probably make people argue with each other in the comments, so I'll just simplify it here. Both parents suck, especially for forcing 2 random children to make a choice like this, but the mother manipulated Blue and left out important information. She also believes that because her son and husband aren't blood related, they don't love each other, and I take serious issue with that, so we went with the father. Both parents' reactions to this made me wish that we could have chosen neither. The parents exit, leaving the boys to wonder if they did the right thing. They don't know if they made the right decision, but they can't do much about it now. Green says that they remind him of his own parents, constantly fighting but not knowing how to stop, then forcing Green to choose who is right so they can shift the blame onto him instead of themselves. They continue forth, moving slower now so they don't risk running into the parents again. Neither of the boys particularly want to return home after that interaction. Guess we're here again,
Oh, wait. Come back.
What are you seeing?
I see a pit of water.
Our worlds no longer mirror each other as accurately as before. There are major differences, forcing us to describe what we see to the best of our ability so we can figure out how to progress. I love this idea. It once again gives me We Were Here vibes with the communication aspects, but you can more clearly see what your partner is talking about since you still occupy the same space, even if it looks somewhat different for each person. The differences in our realities are bridged through the use of small robots that can do things like act as platforms or hold up lengths of chain. To progress, I grab a box and place it in the center of the pit for from Cyan's perspective, allowing her to use it as a platform and jump over. Next, Cyan sees a movable block while I see an immovable chain. These are the same entity, meaning when Cyan moves the block next to the cliff, I see the chain moving and can use it to climb on top before helping Cyan up as well. I've never seen a game with puzzles like this, and Bokura does it really well. The puzzles don't usually take all that long to get done, but they're challenging enough to be immensely satisfying each and every time. During a lot of these, I had the tendency to overcomplicate the puzzles, which was tricky to get used to but was ultimately beneficial. It doesn't take long for the boys to realize that they're seeing different things. They're walking on air and through walls. That's clearly not normal. They stop and have a discussion. Green describes his picture book-esque world full of cartoon animals, and Blue describes his broken down post-apocalyptic robot hellscape. Blue thinks that they might be sick. How else could any of this make sense? Maybe they should turn back, but the path is blocked now, right? They've fallen through plenty of bridges that prevent them from returning. The duo turn back to give it a try anyway, stopping in their tracks as an arrow thocks into the ground underneath them. It's a hunter and a dog. For Blue, both are robotic, with the dog making a horrific screeching noise. For Green, the hunter wears a mask and has a dog with a mouth that stretches across its entire body. The boys begin to sprint, jumping off a small cliff so that they cannot be followed. They have no idea who that was, but he was clearly trying to kill them. They dash off in search of the parents from before in the hopes of them having a cell phone so that the authorities can be called. We now have to worry about these dogs from before. They're in different colors in the animal world, but look identical in the robot world. The dogs are hostile towards Green, but not towards Blue, meaning I get to do things like this. When I step on it, what happens?
That's gross. That's nasty.
Gross. This next section is entirely based on using the dog's hostility mechanics to your advantage. By using Cyan as bait, I can maneuver the dog around. When we want the dog to stop, I can step on the back plate, extending this piston/spine. This can also be used to create brand new platforms, which can really come in handy. Before they can get very far, the boys run into a dog that appears to have fallen off a cliff. It's split into 3 parts, which is a lot less disturbing for Blue than it is for Green. Blue takes a closer look, claiming that to him, the dog doesn't look dead, almost like he can repair it. He reaches inside, grabbing the wires and reattaching them, bringing new life to the canine, who runs away without harming either boy. This is pretty cool, but substantially harder to watch and listen to for Green, since there were no wires for him. There were intestines. They continue forwards, doing some more puzzles based around the dogs. I'm not a huge fan of these ones. They aren't bad or anything, I guess they just kind of feel repetitive. Thankfully, this section of the game really likes giving out cutscenes. Here the boys run into a house. They wonder if there may be a phone inside that they can use to call for help, learning that Green sees a locked door while Blue sees one that's sitting wide open. Since Green can't enter, they split up for a second time. Inside the house, Blue finds 2 robots that are seemingly powered down. They sit slumped in chairs next to each other, completely unmoving. On the wall is another larger robot with a glowing blue eye. It's shocked when Blue responds to it, baffled that someone is actually able to hear it. I'm gonna call it Wallbot. Blue quickly learns that Wallbot is an AI consciousness that inhabits all of the animals in this area, although not willingly. Wallbot blathers on about how Blue is one of the people who can see the world for what it truly is. Apparently Wallbot has no control over its actions, claiming that anything it does is under the control of the hunter from earlier, who it calls Gramps. Blue asks about the 2 robots in the corner, learning that they are the hunter's wife and daughter. He's been killing machines, dismantling them for parts to try and bring his family back to life. Wallbot explains that a man broke into the hunter's home, knocking him out, killing his daughter, and assaulting his wife. By the time that the hunter woke up, his wife was dead. But not at the hands of the criminal. Despite the tragedy, the hunter stayed strong. He wanted to live his life as happily as possible, helping as many people as he could, for his family. But he pushed himself too hard. Eventually he went senile and he began to hurt people instead of helping them, succumbing to desperation and blind to unrealistic hope. Blue states that he's confused, leaving the home and abandoning Wallbot without even looking for a phone. Meanwhile, Green waits patiently outside, hearing a voice from the distance claiming that he should get away from that house. The source of the voice reveals itself to be a rabbit, who reiterates that Green needs to get away from the house. It's dangerous since a killer lives there. This killer apparently killed the rabbit's parents and friends, leaving only its little brother. The rabbit swears to keep its little brother safe. When it learns that Green's friend is inside the home, the rabbit immediately dismisses Blue as dead. Suddenly, it screams in fear. The hunter has returned and everybody needs to hide. Green moves to hide behind some lumber, but before the rabbit can escape to protect its brother, an arrow buries itself into the side of the poor thing. While Green cowers in fear, the parents from earlier wander onto the scene. They don't realize the danger that they're in until the hunter shoots the husband in the chest. The wife scrambles away in fear as the hunter grabs his axe and cleaves her spouse's head off in one fell swoop. The hunter then gives chase, leaving Green the perfect opportunity to try and get Blue's attention. He fixed the dog from earlier, right? Maybe he can put the rabbit and husband back together. As Green runs back, Blue exits the house. Green is visibly panicked, explaining the situation to Blue and showing him the bodies. But these bodies aren't like the dog. They're properly dead and cannot be repaired. Despite Green's objections, Blue runs off in chase of the hunter so they can try and help the surviving parent. Before they can get very far, their concerns about the mother are alleviated. The hunter's dead. It seems he fell from a cliff like the dog from earlier. When the boys look up, they see someone standing on the cliff. It's unclear whether this person pushed the hunter or simply watched as he fell, but one thing is for certain. They're a human, and around the same age as Blue and Green, too. While looking at the hunter, Blue realizes that this body is different from the father and the rabbit. He can bring this one back to life. This is our next big decision. Should we fix the hunter? Would it be right to do so? We didn't kill him, meaning we have no responsibility if we leave him be. But if we bring him back and he hurts people, that falls on us. But when we brought the dog back to life, it was an entirely different creature. It didn't attack us anymore, and it happily trotted away. Was it because we fixed the dog, or did the dog have some kind of change of heart because of the way that Blue rewired him? If we bring the hunter back, there's a chance that he will be a changed man and will stop hurting others, living out the rest of his days peacefully. But is it worth that risk? This choice was a lot harder to make than the one with the parents. There weren't immediately understood stakes in that situation, although we learned later on that whoever you choose would be the parent that died in this scene. In the end, we took the risk and tried to bring the hunter back to life. Before they can find out if he's nice now, the boys run away from the body, just in case. Blue wonders if he did the right thing. The dog from earlier trots over to his owner and the two embrace. After the scene transitions back to the boys, we never see him again. Blue and Green continue walking, spotting the young boy from the cliff further down the path. He walks away, with the duo deciding to try and catch up. We are finally back to the puzzles, and we have a very unusual game mechanic to try out. This device right here currently functions as a teleporter. On my end, it looks like Cyan had her head removed and the life left her body, while for her, she just straight up gets vored and spat out on the top of the cliff. One of the most interesting puzzles from this section is right here. There are two springs that allow for you to bounce back and forth. Cyan has to use this since she can stop her momentum with the teleporter. She then can pull a cushion over to a button here that will both lift this pillar and move this floating platform out of the way. I need to jump over the pillar towards a spring that the platform was covering up. We actually got this on our second or third try, but didn't realize we had to move the cushion over. It then took us an extra dozen tries just to make that one jump. It was getting late, so I'll chalk it up to my platforming competence being clouded by exhaustion. As we progress, the teleporter changes functions. Instead of moving Cyan from one location to another, it duplicates her, placing one on each end. This created quite a few interesting puzzles where she needed to stagger herself using the environment. We sometimes had to use her corpses for platforming, which is fairly disturbing. Blue and Green run into the boy from earlier, asking him if he's seen the mother. He doesn't answer, seemingly shocked that the two aren't scared of him. Why would they be scared of him? They express some confusion at this before reiterating their question and learning that he did not see the woman. He's actually looking for her too, since it gets dangerous in the mountains at night and he got concerned. The sun is going to set soon, prompting the boy to invite them to follow him to a cave where they make a campfire and settle down for the night. I don't know why they did this, but the effect of the fire makes Blue look green and Green look blue, which is really confusing if you're seeing it from the robot universe. According to the boy, it gets dark quickly in the mountains, so you can't waste any time. He learned that from his father. It sounds like he ran away from home, prompting the duo to ask if the woman he saw was his mother. He says he couldn't tell for sure, but she certainly resembled her. This is enough for Blue and Green to decide that this must be the missing son, so they tell him everything. Well, almost everything. They neglect to tell him that his father was murdered, at least for the time being. The boy is saddened by the fact that his parents are still fighting, even after he left. He begins to cry, with Blue comforting him and handing over a handkerchief. The boy hasn't talked to anyone in a long time, so a conversation begins. He speaks of his parents, stating that his mother is kind and his father is strong. Blue shares next, stating that he doesn't have a father, but that he might be able to see him soon. That's why he ran away in the first place, to try and find his dad. A while back, Blue went on a trip with his mother and her boyfriend, and they left him at a park for 3 days. A man approached him there and they played Pokemon together. Blue thinks that maybe it was his father. What if he asked to see his son, and that's why the mother and boyfriend left? After all, why would a strange man try to befriend a child? Blue, you sweet innocent summer child, I have some unfortunate news for you. Green tries to tell his friend that this is unrealistic. He doesn't want Blue to get his hopes up only to have them crushed. He thinks he understands how the man in the park felt. He started hanging out with Blue because he had nobody else, so he tried talking to the only one there. Nowadays, he spends time with Blue because he likes him. Maybe that's what happened with the man in the park as well. They argue for a bit before being interrupted by the boy's laughter. He can tell that Blue and Green care a lot for each other, wishing he had friends like that too. They all agree to talk more so that they can all be friends. But first and foremost, a sin has to be corrected. This boy doesn't know what Pokemon is. Wait, if he doesn't know what Pokemon is, Don't tell me you don't know what GamerSupps is. Oh, you poor soul. Thankfully for you, this video is sponsored by GamerSupps, so you're about to get educated. GamerSupps is a company that makes an assortment of yummy things to cram into your face. Their energy formula has 0 calories, is keto-friendly, has essential vitamins, and comes in tons of different flavors. Each serving has 100 milligrams of caffeine, or you can get it completely caffeine-free. They even have teas, which are my personal favorite, as well as some instant ramen. It's called Gamer Soups, which in my eyes is hysterical. I haven't had the chance to try them myself yet, but Cyan has, so why don't you give it a review? Okay, use code Ben again to help support the channel while getting 10% off your order. They stay up late into the night talking and laughing before eventually falling asleep. They even finally learn his name, Haru. When they wake up, Haru is missing and the fire has been put out. The two continue their search, now both for the mother and Haru. The puzzles in this section focus on a new structure, this time being one that only I can use. I can use this one. This device removes my head, making me lighter and allowing me to move over bridges with lower weight capacities. Unfortunately, I still see through my head with my eyes, meaning one of us has to carry it around, throwing it during platforming sections. I think this is a clever gimmick for a few of the puzzles, and I actually liked it a lot at the start. Cyan had to direct me around for some sections, but I was also able to use some audio cues. Unfortunately, the more simple and fun puzzles like this did not last, leading us to the most frustrating and boring section of the entire game, for me at least. Here, we have a platform with a button on it as well as a chain behind a mechanical wall. I'm supposed to leave my head behind while Cyan directs my body up the chain and into the next area. There are puzzles on the other side of the chain that require 2 people, so Cyan has to give me a verbal description of what to do. When she hits this button, the platform with my head is moved to an entirely different section underground. Floating platforms and springs push it around kind of like a Mario Maker auto level until settling on this spring. For the next 10 minutes, this was my life. Following directions with no visual indicators of what I am doing while listening to the same loud spring over and over again. Cyan had to navigate up a zigzag-shaped cavern through the mountain while directing me the entire way. I could not help with a single puzzle in this section. That inadvertently resulted in one of the most funny 6 minutes of footage I've ever recorded. Once Cyan realized that the block should be pressing the button, not my body, she helped direct me through the cavern into a large room with many holograms. My head could see some of the same holograms nearby, meaning I had to describe them so Cyan could push the respective buttons. After this, my head had to be directed even further over some precarious bridges and onto more platforms and buttons. This puzzle has already been going on for about 20 minutes and I'm bored out of my freaking mind.
Why? Why is this puzzle so long? What the fuck?
Finally, my head is raised up onto a platform where it can be returned to my body and I can actually play the video game. Just kidding. That'd be too merciful. I do actually get to do something here though. There's a large animated diagram displaying a room and a set of 15 moves that I have to relate to Cyan. This wasn't actually that difficult, but I had to wait the full 50 seconds for the animation to loop each time I needed to reference the next step, which really made this drag on. Add on the fact that Cyan kept not being able to grab this chain and dying, and we had a grand old time over here. We replayed this segment so many times that I could fully do my part of the work while only using sound cues. That didn't make it any more interesting considering I still couldn't see the actual room. I just had to look at this continuously looping animation. After 50 minutes, we finally got through this single puzzle. I was brought upwards, Cyan grabbed my head, and I reunited with my body. I could only hold my head for now, but I could finally play the game again. I know that our gameplay here could have been far more optimized, and maybe that would have made this section more bearable, but I still think that it was a fundamentally terrible idea to put one of the players in a place where their only option is to sit and wait. After this, we got to a segment where Cyan put my head on the body of a dog so that I could control it. This is pretty cool, but I was definitely getting tired by this point. Hey, champ.
Hello. Wait.
This part is so much cooler than the previous section, and I love getting to use the dog mechanics at will this time around instead of having to lure them into specific locations. After the first 2 puzzles as a dog, we finally reached a save point and could call it for the night. The next day I came back fully re-energized and ready to solve some puzzles. I don't know what you're seeing, hop on. There were a couple pretty cool puzzles in this section, one of my favorites being where Cyan had to get both of us through a vertical maze that was invisible from my point of view. After this, we finally got to a machine where we could return my head to the body so that we can play the game normally again. The boys are beginning to realize that they're almost at the top of the mountain. There are no more puzzles, just a simple walk forwards to the statue. Up close, it's smaller than they thought it would be. It looks completely different in 2 different worlds, but that shouldn't change its durability. It's time to blow up the statue. Before they light it, Blue sets down his copy of Pokemon Green next to the fire firework bomb. He doesn't need it anymore. He brought it to show his dad, but now he realizes that Green was right. That man wasn't his father. They light the firework bomb and run away. The boys laugh over the failure of the bomb. Suddenly, their heads begin to hurt and the world begins to glitch just like it did next to the deer. When the boys open their eyes again, everything is back to normal. Green and Blue are humans and are completely overjoyed. Green says that he got to do what he wanted to, even if it didn't work out. That just leaves Blue. Does he still want to run away? Blue decides to stay. Running somewhere far away won't help anything. Even when they were swapping realities, Blue was still Blue. If he wants the world to change, he has to change too. That means he should stay here and focus on improving both himself and his town. Green likes this idea, making Blue promise not to leave him behind. Before they leave, Green makes a confession. The reason he wanted to blow up the statue isn't because it's a statue of the mayor. It's a statue of his father. His father never pays attention to him, so Green figured that if he acted up, maybe he would finally get it. But Green doesn't care anymore. He hates his dad. Why should he care if the guy pays attention to him or not? Blue is completely shocked by this revelation. It sounds like he's the only one in the entire town who didn't know about this. Everyone tends to avoid him, which probably contributed to that ignorance. Green tells Blue that he started talking to him specifically because he didn't know who he was. But also, he had a bit of a theory. His dad slept around a lot, and Blue and Green look very similar. That combined with the fact that Blue doesn't have a dad leads him to think that they might actually be half-brothers. It would certainly give Blue's mom a reason to never mention the mayor. But before Green can finish his thought, a scream echoes in the distance. The brothers run to investigate, finding the mother cowering in fear. The monster from the start of the game is back, and it just ate her. The creature turns its attention to the boys, prompting them to run away screaming. They quickly realize that the part of the hill that they jumped down earlier is too tall to climb back up. There's a seesaw that they can use, but no weight to put on the other end. The only way to get up is for one of the boys to stay behind, acting as the final weight. The two quickly get into a heated argument about who will stay behind. But they aren't arguing about wanting to be the one to leave, they're arguing about wanting to be the one to stay. Both boys desperately want their best friend to live, even if it means sacrificing their own life. The game then enters the decision screen one final time, forcing you to choose who lives and who dies. Now, while I would love if both boys would just stand on one end of the seesaw so that when the monster draws close they would both be lifted high enough to escape, we don't have that option. The logic that Cyan and I used is that we're pretty sure the character we saw at the very start of the game was Green, so he has to live no matter what, right? As horrible as it is that we have to make this decision, we chose for Blue to leave and Green to stay behind. They say a final goodbye and Blue walks away. The monster draws closer and Green's screams echo throughout the mountains. Blue can't do this. He can't just leave his best friend to die. He springs back, jumping from the ledge and putting himself between the monster and his friend. Green isn't dying today, at least not alone. Blue begins to grab rocks, throwing more and more at the creature. It begins to cry harder than before, backing up, almost scared. The monster spits out the mother and runs away. The boys run to her, asking if she's okay. She recognizes them immediately. Then, Blue spots a handkerchief on the ground, the same one that he gave to Haru. The mom claims that she's never seen it before, meaning the monster must have dropped it. Does this mean that the monster ate Haru? What if the monster is Haru? Is that why he was shocked when the boys weren't scared of him? We cut back to the train, where the boy from earlier reflects on everything. After the monster ran away, the boys returned and told the adults the whole story, but the only thing that they believed was about the old man killing the people in the woods, probably because the mother made the same claims. The authorities went into the woods and found the old man desecrating a human body, most likely that of the father. Even then, nobody believed them, and the boys knew what they had just seen and experienced was real. They would remember that journey for the rest of their lives. The man on the train doesn't know where his friend is. They drifted apart, as many friends do. Going to different schools certainly didn't help. The boy never had another friend like that, and he will always remember him and treasure their time together. This is a fascinating ending, and it ties into some of the choices you make during the game, meaning that how you played actually results in some changes. I'm specifically really curious about Haru, since he never appeared again after that cave scene, and that monster dropped the handkerchief. Was he eaten, or was he the monster the whole time, and we only saw him as a human while in the other worlds? Well, thankfully we can get more information by playing through the entire game a second time. You can get a second ending by experiencing both sides of the story and then attempting to play the game for a third time. When you boot up the game with the same friend a second time, it automatically switches characters and skips the tutorial, spawning you right on the other side of the final tutorial puzzle. This is genius design, and it really encourages people to try the other options, which I love. The game is obviously an entirely different experience when you play through as the other character, but I didn't realize the extent to which the differences were present. The music is completely different, giving off a whole new vibe. To me, Bokura is a melancholic game full of piano music and wastelands that match that tone. But to Cyan, it's more hopeful and upbeat with joyful music utilizing instruments like marimbas. It also plays completely differently because you can see and interact with different objects, which makes it really fun to replay. I think Cyan was having fun messing with me this time around.
There's a giant platform, but it's not where it is on your screen.
I can't... Warn me! During this playthrough, we chose the exact opposite options for each section. Despite our better judgment, we chose the mother, which led to her death later on. We also chose not to repair the hunter after his fall. Something else I learned is that there's actually a fake Game Boy Color built into the cutscenes when you and your friends split up. You can dodge a bunch of plungers as a little rabbit man. It gets really chaotic really quickly. Something that angers me substantially more is I found out that this minigame is inside of the pause menu under the label Pass Time. I was always too scared to click this because I was worried it would make you wait until a different time of day or something, but nope, you literally just pull out a Game Boy to pass time. That would have been really nice during the waiting puzzle from earlier, but it still doesn't make up for the flawed design. Speaking of that puzzle, it was way easier this time around. We beat it in like 10 minutes, which is still way too long to make somebody sit in the cave alone, but at least Cyan had her Game Boy this time. Once we got back to the final decision, we had a really important choice to make. Do I improve the content by choosing to leave as green, or do I choose to stay and get the last achievement that I need to 100% the game? I have no regrets. This time, once we reach the confrontation where Blue returns and everyone starts throwing rocks at the monster, realities shift once again, revealing that Haru is in fact the creature and that his appearance changes based on what world he is viewed from. He apologizes for scaring Blue and Green, thanking them for being his friends, even if it was just for one night. He says that the memories of that one night are enough to keep him going. Realities shift, and Haru walks away. The boys stand in shocked silence, talking to the husband this time. The boys reflect on what they did to Haru without realizing that it was their new friend before both break down into tears. We transition back to the train scene. This plays out almost exactly the same, with the only difference being that the hunter is already dead when the authorities begin their investigation. After the credits, an extra scene plays. This is when Cyan and I came to the realization that we are bumbling morons. We didn't notice that when we played the game the first time, the boy on the train had a completely differently colored coat. We aren't both seeing green, we're seeing the adult versions of our characters. I originally saw blue, and Cyan originally saw green. They spoke the same dialogue, but they were different people the entire time. During the extra scene, the boys pick up their phones. Green calls his dad while Blue calls his mom. Green wants to know how to contact the woman who runs the bar in town, while Blue wants to know how to contact the mayor. Both are denied help at first, but the boys know that the mayor visits the bar just like everyone else in town. Their parents should know that contact information. They assure their parents that they only want to try and get in contact with each person's son. They're asked why, and both give the same response. They both need to meet their old friend together. They hang up their phones before shifting back into the robotic world for a moment, confirming the identities of the two boys. Upon starting a third playthrough, the character select screen features the adult versions of Green and Blue. The boys walk into the woods exactly as they did when they were children. Some of the puzzles have changed, with platforms, blocks, and bridges being absent. Because they're taller now, they don't need these assets to progress. The developers program them to be able to reach higher areas. As they exit the tutorial area, Haru is here and larger than ever. He has even more mutations than before and sits right where the deer used to. The boys walk up without any fear, calling Haru by name. Haru opens his mouth, eating them. The world flashes into static, revealing Haru, hugging his friends as tears stream down his face. I love this game. I couldn't tell you why there were multiple worlds, or why Green shifted into the robot world on the train, or why eating the boys looked like a hug for them, but not when they saw it happen to the dad, and that's okay, because it's not necessary for the story to be as impactful as it was. Even with some of the technical issues I had, like the main menu and the headless puzzle, I can confidently say that Bokura is one of the best games I've ever played. The amount of love and care that went into it is unreal. The puzzles are seamless and fun and are perfect little roadblocks. I love that you get to make seriously difficult choices as you go through, and that the characters are flawed but lovable. These kids actually feel like little kids. They're just the right amount of ignorant about the world. When Haru ate the boys and it was revealed that he was hugging them, I genuinely got chills, and the game's masterful use of music really contributed to that. I'm still so impressed that they managed to make the same game feel so totally unique on each side of the story. I know my favorite side was blue and Cyan's favorite was green, and I'm really curious if that's because those were the characters that we started as. Bokura is an incredible example of storytelling in the medium of video games. It takes such a simplistic form that it honestly felt even more impactful when all of my expectations were defied. I would highly recommend playing through the game for yourself because nothing beats experiencing it firsthand. I hope to see you all again. Have a great rest of your day.